On the last night of his life, he wrote 3 letters. Then he put on the hood he had prepared. It had words written on it. Don't open the bag. Just telephone the boys. And just like that, he ended his life ahead of time. Sheriff Willoughby's death spread quickly throughout the town. People immediately pointed the finger at the stubborn mother. They believed it was her billboards that drove the sheriff to his death. But she could never forget that if she hadn't said those cruel words to her daughter, things would never have come to this.
I hope I get raped on the way!
Yeah, well, I hope you get raped on the way too.
That very day, her daughter was raped and murdered under the 3 billboards. The killer fled the scene quickly. The police had no leads. The case soon became a cold case. The mother could not accept that her daughter's case would go unresolved. So a terrible plan began to grow in her heart. She spent all her savings to rent all 3 billboards near the crime scene, and she wrote 3 sentences on them. When the ad manager saw what was written, he immediately guessed who she was. The 3 billboards read, "Raped while dying," and still no arrests. How come, Chief Willoughby? Not only that, she also called in reporters to stir things up further. Her extreme actions made the whole town aware of the case, but no one supported Mildred's actions. Almost everyone stood by Sheriff Willoughby, because he had always been deeply respected in the town. This undoubtedly made Mildred the town's public enemy. Soon the townspeople sent a priest to Mildred's home. He represented the entire town and asked her to take down the billboards. But how could she possibly agree? Even her son couldn't stand it anymore. He hoped his mother would take them down because he didn't want his sister to be judged even after death. The next morning, Willoughby came to visit Mildred. He patiently explained to her the whole process of her daughter's murder. There were no witnesses. They had already done everything they could to find the killer, but the DNA they collected did not match any of the suspects. But Mildred wouldn't listen to any of it. Seeing that she was determined, Willoughby sighed and revealed another secret. He was already suffering from cancer and didn't have long to live. But even so, Mildred still directed her anger at Willoughby. He knew that saying more was useless and could only leave helplessly. Every day with his sick body, he searched for new evidence at the crime scene, but he still found nothing. And right next to him stood the huge red billboards. One day, the ad manager suddenly told Mildred that the money she had paid was only a deposit. If she wanted to keep the billboards up, she would have to pay rent again. Otherwise, they would have to come down. At that moment, the secretary excitedly walked in and said someone had just anonymously sent $5,000 to cover Mildred's billboard fee. Mildred finally breathed a sigh of relief. But Sheriff Willoughby was not so lucky. His condition worsened by the day. The doctor said he needed long-term hospitalization, but he didn't want to watch his life fade away like that. So he chose to leave the hospital. He took his family on a vacation by the river. At night, he tucked his children into bed and spent his last night with his wife. Then he wrote 3 letters, one to his wife, one to Dixon, and one to Mildred. After caressing his beloved horse, he put on the hood and chose to leave the world. Soon after, Mildred received the letter. In it, Willoughby apologized once again for not catching the killer. He even comforted her, saying maybe one day the killer would come out on his own. Willoughby not only approved of her billboard idea, but also wished her success in finding the killer. Mildred felt a whirlwind of emotions after reading it. The person who supported her most was actually Sheriff Willoughby, the man she had fought against. Not only did he pay for the billboards, but in a way he wanted to catch the killer even more than Mildred did. But that night, as Mildred drove home, she suddenly saw the billboards engulfed in flames. She immediately pulled over, grabbed a fire extinguisher, and tried to put it out. But the small extinguisher was no match for the blazing fire of her hatred. Her son tried to stop her, but it was too late. Only Mildred knew that the burning billboard was her very life, but it was already too late. The fire had melted away her stubborn heart. Reporters claimed the fire soothed Willoughby's spirit and that Mildred would give up because of it. But they underestimated this iron-willed woman. Her real revenge was just about to begin. That night, Mildred went across the street from the police station. She called the station to make sure no one was there. But what she didn't know was, Dixon was still inside the station with his headphones on, reading the letter Willoughby had left him, and didn't hear the phone ring. This made Mildred think everyone had left, so she grabbed the Molotov cocktails and kept throwing them at the station, until the last one was thrown, blasting Dixon out of the building. When Dixon got up, his first instinct was to protect Mildred's case file. Seeing the flames before him, Dixon didn't hesitate to jump through them. Enduring unbearable pain, he threw the case file to safety. Mildred, who thought no one was inside, was completely stunned. When she saw what Dixon had saved, it was her daughter's file. Her emotions became even more complicated. Dixon, now badly burned, was sent to the hospital. Soon after, Dixon, just out of the hospital, drank heavily at a bar. He overheard a man bragging about having murdered a girl, and the way he described it was eerily similar to Mildred's daughter's case. So he found an excuse, pretended to perform a magic trick, and scratched the man's face hard with his nails. The man flew into a rage. With the last of his strength, Dixon dragged his battered body home. He scraped off some of the man's skin and put it into a test tube. The next day, he eagerly went to find Mildred. He told her not to give up. This man could very well be the real killer. Seeing the scarred Dixon, Mildred seemed to see Sheriff Willoughby. Her heart softened, but sadly, after the investigation, the man turned out not to be the killer. His DNA did not match the suspects. Dixon went home, crestfallen. He took out a hunting rifle and sat there thinking for a long time. At last, he told Mildred the disappointing news. When Mildred heard it, she could no longer hold back her emotions. For the first time, she choked up. Their last hope was gone. But then, Dixon had a new idea. Even though the man wasn't the killer of this case, he was still guilty of other crimes. So the two of them let go of their anger, yet held on to it at the same time, and set out on a journey to seek justice.